couple months ago, GitHub introduced a nice little Ruby gem called Redcarpet. This is used to interpret Markdown, and internally it uses the Upskirt C library, and it's really easy to use. So let me show you how you can add it to a Rails app here, do some customizing, and maybe add some syntax highlighting too. We'll be working with a blogging style application like you see here. This is a single article page, and if I try to edit this article, you can see if I try to split this up into two paragraphs, that it still gets mushed into one paragraph because this content is being output directly to HTML and it's not being interpreted in any way. What we want to do is interpret this through Markdown. It's a perfect use case here so that the user has a lot of flexibility in how they want to format this. The first thing we need to do to install Redcarpet is to go into your application's gem file and add Redcarpet into here. I bet you wouldn't have guessed that. And be sure to run the bundle command to install it. And next, go into any template where you want to interpret the Markdown. In this case, it's the action articles controller show action, and use Redcarpet here. So in the article's content where we output that, we'll just say Redcarpet, instantiate that, and then call to HTML on it, just like that. Now when we reload this, you'll notice that it's outputting the paragraph tags directly here because it's auto-escaping in Rails 3. One way to fix this is to go into your template and use the raw method. And then if we reload, you can see that it interprets the paragraphs properly. Now doing all of this whenever you want to interpret some Markdown, it's kind of a pain. So let's make a method called Markdown. And that'll do all this for us. So inside of the application helper, let's make that Markdown method, have it interpret some text, and we can call Redcarpet new, pass in the text. And whenever I'm outputting content from a helper method here, HTML, I can call HTML safe on this. I like using that instead of the raw method. And we can reload and see that that works just as well. Now let's get into customizing how this Markdown works. One thing that always bothers me is when breaks are not properly handled, just a single new line. So if we just make a break here, you can see that that's all interpreted onto a single line. It would be great if we had a break tag here in the HTML. Now if you take a look at the Redcarpet documentation, you can see that there are a number of options here, and one of them is called hard wrap, which does just what we want. So you can pass options as symbols into this initialize method, so we can say hard wrap. And then you can see if we reload this page here, that give me a break now appears on two lines just like the user typed it. Now here are some of my other favorite options you can pass in here. One thing I like to do is filter the HTML so that if you don't trust the source, maybe you aren't adding any authorization, maybe you're having a comment thread or something and anyone can put HTML in there, this will strip out that HTML so it's much more secure. I also like to add auto links so that it automatically detects URLs and links them. I also like to add no intra-emphasis. That's hard to spell. Anyway, this basically means that it's not going to interpret underscores as emphasis if it's in the middle of a word. Basically, have you ever seen it where someone types in some code and they don't add code blocks and then it all has all these emphases because of the underscores? So this basically resolves that issue. Now this options list is getting a little unwieldy here, so let's move this out into a variable here. Just an array, and interpret that into here. There we go. And finally, the last options I like to add in here have to deal with code blocks. I like to add the fenced code option, and I'll show you that in a minute, and the GitHub block code option, like that. So now with these two options, we're able to add code blocks just like we do in GitHub. So if we edit this article here, you can see if we add a code block just like this, we can basically put any Ruby code we want into here, and then it will be interpreted in a pre-tag with the proper language applied, just like it is in GitHub. Now you can also use a more traditional way of doing fenced code in Markdown, which is to use tildes instead of backticks. So it would look like this, 3 tildes, and then a class like that, and that will interpret to basically the exact same thing here with the GitHub code block. Okay, now what about some syntax highlighting? How do we make this code look prettier? The way GitHub handles this is using Python's Pygments syntax highlighter and the Albino Ruby gem. So let's do that same thing here. First, just add Albino to the gem file, of your project. And let's also install Nokogiri into here so that we can interpret the HTML and parse it that Redcarpet generates. So run the bundle command to install these. You will also need to install Pygments if you haven't already. On my system, I just did sudo easy install Pygments, and that's it. It installed Pygments just like that. And then back inside our application helper, let's add a wrapper method around our Redcarpet HTML that's generated. So let's call it syntax highlighter. And let's wrap all the way. So we're going to pass in our HTML that's generated into this. Now to speed things up, I'm just going to paste in the code for this method. It's pretty simple though. All we do is make a new Nokogiri HTML document, and we search for all the pre-tags with a language attribute. And for each of those, we just replace it with the albino colorize call, which will do all the highlighting for us. And we just return that document as a string. Now this code is based on the Rack Pigmentized gem by Lee Jarvis, so you may also want to check that out. I'll link to it in the show notes. By the way, with this method, it's really easy to just swap in any other syntax highlighting library in here, such as CodeRay or anything else you may prefer. Now I also added some style sheets off camera, so you can check out the full source code if you're interested in that. But now if I reload this page here, you can see, there we go. There's our pretty syntax code highlighting. Well, that wraps up our look into Redcarpet. Be sure to check out their GitHub project and the show notes for more information. Hope you enjoyed it.